So let me show you how you can animate this guy. So by drawing him on his own layers like this in the main timeline where it says scene 1, it actually makes things a little bit tricky for you because we need him to be a movie clip, a symbol, before we can animate him. So what we're going to do is we're going to click and hold and drag downwards all in one movement. So I've selected all of these frames. Okay, you can see there it's all dotty, so it's selected the entire duck. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose copy frames. You don't want to choose just copy from up here, you want to right click and choose copy frames. I'll explain why in a minute. So then we're going to go insert, new symbol. We want to make sure for type, I'll just hide that for the moment, you need to set that. So for type, we want it to be a movie clip. And up here, it's important when you name it, you don't just leave it as symbol 1, symbol 2, symbol 3, etc. Because once you make a fairly detailed animation, you'll have lots of symbols and life is a lot easier if the names mean something. So we're going to call this duck. Makes sense. Press OK, and everything disappears. The reason being is that we've now gone into symbol edit mode. Okay, so you can see here it actually says duck. We're actually inside the symbol for this blank new symbol or this new movie clip we've just made. We're not back in the main animation now. Okay, so what we can do though is just select this frame and choose, or actually right click on it and choose paste frames. Bang. Okay, that's why it was important to copy frames before and just copy. It will remember the labels, the layers, and bring everything in. Okay, so now we can go back to our main scene by just moving over where it says scene 1 and clicking on it. You can see that duck disappears and we can press delete here. Okay, so everything was still selected. I'll just undo that. The entire duck was still selected. I can press delete, but because we'd created a symbol and added all those layers in, our duck still exists. We haven't, we've actually just got it as a more usable object over here. So what we can now do is I'm just going to shift select all of the layers except for one, and then just click on the trash can here. And then I'm going to double click this layer and call it ducky. And then here, with my duck movie clip, I'm just going to drag it onto the stage. And now, it's dragging it and treating it all as one object. Okay? And if I want to go back and edit it and make any changes to it or do something else with those layers, etc., all I need to do, you can see I've got my blue bounding box around it and my little cross and my little registration point, which tells me it's a symbol. All I need to do is double click on that and it takes me here back into the duck symbol edit mode. Here's all my layers and frames, etc. Okay, so then I just click on scene, I'm back in my main animation. It's important to understand the difference between those because often people will accidentally double click on an object like that and they'll be in edit mode and they'll do all this animation and stuff and then they'll open up their animation and there'll be nothing there and they'll freak out and they'll think they've lost it all. And it's just that you did it in the wrong place. It's inside a symbol. So it's important to understand that. Okay, so what we might do firstly is I'm just going to use my free transform tool, hold down shift and just make Ducky a little bit small. I'm just going to drag him down and move him about there. So now that Ducky is a symbol, we can animate him across the stage. So we need a starting point and we need an end point. Okay. So we've got our start point, which is our keyframe here. So all of these numbers along here are the frame labels. They don't do anything. If you click on them, nothing happens. If I say in like other lessons and stuff, click on frame, say 50, I mean in this little box underneath the number like that. You can see it's highlighted. All right, so let's say I want to go to frame 75. So, as it says here, our animation is set to 25 frames per second. So for every 25 frames is equivalent to 1 second of animation. So if I right click here and choose insert keyframe, it creates a keyframe, as you would hope. But the movement that we're about to make will only equal 3 seconds of animation. So it's important to have an understanding of how many frames. You might have a couple of hundred frames and go, oh man, I've done so much. Where in actual fact, you've probably only got a few seconds worth. So it's important to understand how the numbers work as well. And that will help you time things and make them work properly later on. So with this end point or this end frame chosen, I'm just going to click and hold on Ducky and drag him across to the other side. Okay. So if I just click you can, once you've got keyframes, you can click on the numbers to jump your playhead around. Your playhead is this red line here, or you can actually just click on the playhead like that and drag it around. So I want to go back to the start, and I'm going to press the return or the enter key on my keyboard to play my animation. So it's not the best animation in the world. So, but it has done. Animate is, is in some ways is a dummish program because it will only do what we tell it to do. So it requires us to know what's going on because it won't be able to figure it out. So what's happened here is it's done exactly what we wanted it to do. We had it sitting there for 74 frames, and then on the 75th frame, we moved it to there. So that's what a keyframe does. A keyframe, once we've added it, we can then make changes, and it will only make change from that point onwards. Okay? So if I've got my duck sitting there, if I add a keyframe at frame 75 and move him, it will only move him at frame 75. It won't affect anything that's come before it. So that's important to know. Now to add the movement, we can use what's called tweening. And tween, or the word tween is short for in between. So basically we've chosen our start point and our end point, and then Flash, or Animate rather, as it's called now, will do the bits in between. So we can just right click anywhere between these two keyframes and choose Create Classic Tween. We'll use Motion Tweens later on, but Classic Tweens are a little bit easier to start with. There we go. So we've done it right. If we're using a symbol, we've got a nice purple timeline, we've got an arrow, it's all nice and smooth. And then if we click back on frame 1 and press return, our duck will slide across the screen. Okay? Beautiful. That's what we want. Okay? So, we might think, well, it doesn't look that realistic with nothing of the duck moving and he just slides across. So we can actually go back and make changes to it. Now what I tend to do is I'll have multiple versions of the same symbol. So if you've got a character, you might have a bit where it requires him or her to stand still, and you might have another bit where it requires them to walk, and there might be another bit where it requires them to jump. So I tend to have them as separate symbols rather than added into one big convoluted symbol because it becomes much easier to manage. So what I'm going to do is just with I've got my base sort of symbol of duck here, I'm going to right click, choose duplicate, and instead of being duck copy, I'm going to call it duck walking. Okay, so then I'm going to double click that. And I'm back in the symbol that looks familiar, but it is called duck walking now. I'm not dealing with the duck one. So any changes I make here, now that I've duplicated it, will only make changes to this movie clip, not the duck one. That will remain untouched. So if I screw something up horribly here, it's okay. So all I'm going to do is basically tap his feet. I'm going to move them up and down. And I'm going to maybe have that happen over, I don't know, maybe 2 seconds. So first things first, I want to extend everything out, okay? Because what will happen if I extend out the legs layer, if I go to frame 25 here and right click and choose insert keyframe, everything else disappears because it only exists in that one frame for the moment, like right there. So as soon as the playhead moves beyond, let's flip it out, there we go. As soon as I move beyond, everything else disappears. We don't want that, that's going to look weird. So because I've already sort of figured out that this walking part is probably going to take 2 seconds, I can just go to frame 50 up here for the bill, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose insert frame. I don't need to insert keyframe because like I said before, a keyframe is when you want to make changes. You insert the keyframe and then you make the change, and it'll make changes from that point on. But an insert frame is just to extend it out. It's not making changes, we're not animating. We just want it to exist for a longer period of time. Okay, that's all we need to do with those. So we can just lock each of those layers now. That's all we need, and we just need to deal with the legs layer. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is about, what do I want to do? Actually, you know what? I might actually, this will make life a little bit easier. I'll just do a new layer here, and I'm going to call this specifically feet. Okay. So this is what I was talking about with your marquee selection before. I might just go about there. I'm just going to go cut like that. So that was Command X or cut, you can see there, or Control X on a PC. And up here, I'm going to call this left foot. I'm going to create another one called right foot. So just left because I'm looking at it, not his left foot, but it doesn't matter too much. So left foot, I'm going to I'm going to go up here and choose Edit, Paste in Place. That shortcut, if you're not sure of it there, that's the Shift key. So you can go Shift Command V or Shift Control V on a PC is the keyboard shortcut. And that will paste. If I just hide the layer, you can see his foot disappears. That's what's on that layer. That's another way of finding out if you've accidentally drawn on the wrong layer as well. If you just hide it, whatever's on that layer will disappear. And you go, all right, yeah, that's where I put the eyes. Makes sense. That's where I put the bill, etc. Okay, so I'm going to do the same with his other foot now. Select that, Command X to cut, up to right foot, Command Shift V to paste in place, so it pastes exactly where I took it from. So for all intents and purposes, it still looks like one object, but it's on its own layer. For legs now, I don't need any of the legs. But I've got that keyframe there in the middle. So I can either right click on that and choose clear keyframe, or once I've clicked on it, you see if I move them and they go, if I move my mouse over it, I get that little square. That means that I can then just click and hold and drag it along. And that extends it out. And then I can right click and choose clear keyframe because I don't really need a keyframe there. Okay, so I've now got 50 frames of nothing. But the reason that I've put those feet on their own layers is because I'm going to use a tween to move them up and down, and that will be easier if they're on their own layers. So first things first, I'm going to use the left foot. I'm going to right click on that, and I'm going to choose Convert to Symbol. And I'm going to call it duck left foot. And make sure it's movie clip again, and OK. The reason being that if you want to use tweens to animate like we did before with moving Ducky across the screen, each tween has to be on its own layer, otherwise Animate gets confused. It's not sure what you want to move and where and stuff, so if you only have one thing on the layer and use a tween to animate that, everything is much easier. Okay, so get used to using multiple layers. So I want to just sort of move the foot up and down. Like I was saying before, if I firstly want to go to frame 25, I'm going to right click and choose a keyframe first. Create a keyframe. So if I use my transform tool, like I was saying before, it rotates it around this registration point. I don't want that. So I'm going to undo. I'm going to get rid of that keyframe as well, because once you add a keyframe, it remembers that registration point is in the middle. So I'm going to go back to this keyframe. I'm going to use my free transform tool and use my registration point move it there. So now when I rotate, it does like that. Okay. Then I'm going to go back to frame 25 and insert keyframe. And you can see now the registration point is there. So if I bring that up like that, and then go here to the end, go insert keyframe, bring it back down. I now just need to right click. What I've got now if I just press return is foot's there, foot's up, foot's down. Okay, now you can see they're back on that keyframe. I've got a little bit of a join issue there after moving it. I can just use my arrow tool just to grab the end of that line, like that. Okay. Right. So if I press return again from the start, up, down. Now, if I right click in between these keyframes, first section there, and choose classic, and I right click and choose classic there, it'll do smooth movement. So I'll go boom, boom, like that. So the foot comes up and down. Okay. So I'm going to do the same with the other foot. So it's the repetition of the same process. If it's dotty, we need, like it is there, it means it's still just a shape. If I go over here to my properties, it'll tell you. If I click on the object, it's a shape. It needs to be a movie clip or a symbol before you can animate it, or before you can use a tween, certainly. So I'm going to right click on it and choose Convert to Symbol. I'm going to call it duck right foot and press OK. I'm going to use my transform tool to move my registration point up to where the join would be. And here's a shortcut that will save us time. I can add a keyframe here at the very end and choose insert keyframe. And it'll remember that end point, right? Because we want it to go up and down. So then we only need to go to this middle bit, choose insert keyframe, and move it, and it's going to remember that last bit. Okay. So now I can right click between those two keyframes, right click between those, and I've got my nice smooth tween. So I press return now. There we go. So it's probably weird that his feet go the same direction at the same time. It's probably not the best, but we could flip it around. We could have this one, instead of go up, go further down like that, then be sort of paddling. But that'd be all right. That works. Now, the cool thing about movie clips is that if I want him to walk across the screen, I don't need to count up how many steps I want and keep doing this over and over and over. I only need to do it once, because movie clips loop for the entire time they're on the stage. So, you know, if you want a wheel to turn or someone to walk, whatever, you don't have to do it, you know, countless times. You just do it once, do it as a movie clip, and it will loop that animation for you. So as an example, at the moment, we've got a duck that just goes up, down, like that. If we go back and click on scene 1 here, and I go back to my library and grab duck walking, press return. Okay, so the issue there is, like I was saying before, you can see as soon as I put that, I was saying that all motion tweens have to be on their own layer, or classic tweens. As soon as I put that on, our nice smooth line disappeared. It went all dotty, and I got confused about what was moving and what was what, and everything went skew with. So I'm just going to undo, undo again, undo again, undo again. There we go, and our line comes back. Okay. So just to show you an example, I'm just going to drag on duck walking. Going to press return. His legs aren't moving. Why not? Well, the reason is that movie clips don't animate on the timeline like that. So it is working, it does work, but they just don't move in the timeline. So what you need to do is go to Control and Test Movie. Now it doesn't show you here, but the keyboard shortcut for this is Command Return on a Mac or Control Enter on a PC. So if you just choose Animate, it brings up a pop-up window. You can see his little legs are moving now. His little feet are paddling. So the movie clip is working. Okay. So now we could, you know, recopy that animation of him walking across, but there's an easier way. I'm just going to delete this. Just click on the layer 7. We just put our new walking duck on and click on the trash can. So we're left with, if I go Command Return now to test it, the original duck, because that's the one that we haven't changed. So if we just click once on him to see which one he is, we go back to our properties, and it tells us by clicking once on it, it's instance of duck. Whenever you drag something onto the library, or onto the stage rather, from your library, it's called an instance of that object, because you can use them time and time again. I can bring on multiple versions of my duck. I can have an absolute flock going on. Have them in different layers. You can even add blurring to them so it looks like they're off in the distance and all that sort of stuff. So these are all instances of it, okay, of that duck symbol. So the easy way to get him walking, because like I said, it's still just the still feet one, is to go to this first frame, right click on our duck, and over down in this menu we've got swap symbol. Now you have to have made your movie clip symbols first before you can do this. I'm going to go swap symbol, and it essentially brings up all the symbols that exist in our library over here. We want to swap it with duck walking and go OK. Now we need to do that at the end as well on our last keyframe, otherwise it'll be confused. So we need to do it there as well. Click on that keyframe, right click, swap symbol, duck walking, OK. So all the tween and everything still exists. It's exactly how we want it to be. Now we do Command Return though, and you can see He's paddling his little feet as he walks across the stage. So just close that. Now, he's probably going a bit too quick as well for the movement of his feet. So what we can do is just extend out how long this animation goes for. So currently it goes for 3 seconds. Now we've decided maybe it needs to go for like 5, which would be about at 25 frames per second. That would be 125 frames. So we don't need to redo it or anything like that. Like I said before, we can just click once on that frame and let go on our keyframe, our end keyframe, and then move our mouse over till we see that square, click and hold, and drag it along to frame 125. And all it does is extend out the length of the tween. And obviously the more frames it takes, the slower it will be. And vice versa, if you would drag it in to say 50, it will be much quicker because it's going to be doing the same animation but over 2 seconds instead of 3. In this case, it's going to be doing the same animation but over 5 seconds instead of 3. So we go Command Return again to test it, and there he is, slower, doing the same thing, but he's just tip-tapping across the stage. Okay. To make it more realistic, we could have him go all the way off the stage. Just scroll back here to our start so we can see, and have him start off the stage as well. There we go. So now if we press, because remember this, like any stage, this white square, this is where our animation happens. So anything off the stage can't be seen. Just think of it like a real stage if you go to see a play. Anything that's on stage that can be seen by the audience, anything that's standing off in the wings cannot be seen until it moves onto the stage. Okay, there we go. So what I'm going to do now is just create, I might actually just reduce the size a little bit of this so I can see it, just zoom in I mean. So up here you've got 100%, I might just make that, select it and type in 90 and press return, there we go, just so I can see a little bit of the bottom. So now I'm just going to create a new layer, I'm going to double click on it and choose it, call it background, and the hierarchical order, I should say, of your layers determines what can be seen. So anything, the lower down it is, the further back it is, as opposed, with regards to the stage, with regards to the screen. So anything that's above can be seen closer to the front of the stage. So if I were to draw, which I'm gonna, let's say I'm gonna draw a little bit of grass. So I'll just use my paintbrush tool, and I'll change it to sort of darkish green. And I'm just going to go like that. Okay, so it's only the outline. I'm then going to use my paint bucket to fill it. There we go. Now don't worry about all these jaggedy edges because the audience can only see anything within this straight line. Okay, so now if I go Command Return to test, okay, like I was saying, because this background layer is above Duck, we can see it in front of him. So if we want to see Ducky walking across the lawn or above it, we can just click and hold on this background layer. You can see got that line there and drag it below him. And now if I go Command Return to test him again, away we go. So I might just move him up. So I'm just going to click once on the opening frame, and just use my arrow keys on my keyboard just to move him up a smidge. And I'll obviously do the same at the end, otherwise he'll end up going across and down at an angle. There we go. And now on my background, I just want to add some sky. Now this is a little thing as well that just you might want to know, is using my paintbrush, again, I'm just going to, I just want to deselect the grass first, and then I'm going to use like just a blue colour. And I'm going to, doesn't actually matter because I'm not going to see any of this line. I'm just drawing completely around the outside so it can be filled in. Okay, so if I now go to my paint bucket, fill, there we go. Now what you might want to do is to make it a little bit more interesting to look at, instead of just being a flat colour, you can click on it, go down to your fill colour there, and down here you've got a gradient. Right, that's a linear gradient, meaning it's in a line from right to left. So that goes white to black from left to right, which we don't really want, but we can fix it and make it cooler. So first things first, what we're going to do is go up here to our transform tool, click and hold. Instead of free transform, we're going to choose our gradient transform tool. So we're just going to, you can see this little line there, just going to drag that in a smidge. So that just reduces the amount of, or the area that your gradient takes place over. And now if I scroll up here a little bit so I can see the edge, this little circle is my rotate. So I'm just going to rotate that down so it's a vertical gradient as opposed to a left to right one. And then I'm just going to drag it up a smidge. Just want to be able to, there we go. Just bring it up a little bit like that. There we go. And that's looking better. So now I just want it to be sky colors. So to change that I'll just use my arrow tool. I'll select the color of the gradient, so you can see it's all dotty, and go up here to my color palette. If you don't have this palette here, like I said before, any windows you don't have, you can get from your, right there, from your window menu. So it just pops out. So this white one, I want to be a lighter blue. So these little houses or little paint buckets underneath our gradient, they're our gradient colors. So I'm just going to double click on the white there, brings up a swatch, and I'm going to choose like a lighter sky blue. And then here for the black, I'm just going to double click that. And I'm going to bring up a sort of a darker royal sort of blue. And then I'm just going to click on those arrows to hide that back. Click here so it's deselected, and you see I've got a bit of a gradient of a darker blue to lighter blue happening. Just looks a little bit nicer, a little bit more realistic to a degree. So if we go Command Return now to test it, and duck cruises along. Okay,